Week 1 of college football is here, and we have the prime time matchup of the week. The game that everyone's been waiting for down in Atlanta, Georgia. This game has huge implications both for SEC, ACC, and playoff potential leading to the rest of the season. I'm Nathan Johnston, here with my co-host Brad Hopkins and special guest, local real estate mogul and current UGA student, Mr. Ross Whitworth. Ross, good to see you, man.
Thank y'all for having me.
Absolutely. Good to be back for another week of football, Brad. And like I mentioned in the intro, biggest game of the week in a lot of people's opinions. Everyone's ready to see the number 1 Georgia Bulldogs versus the number 14 Clemson Tigers. The question that remains, can the Dogs get back on track and prove themselves in the 2024 season? This game's being played at a neutral siting, Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. 12 o'clock kickoff on ABC/ESPN+. Georgia currently favored by a whopping 13.5 points in this game, Brad. I won't hold you up too much longer. Give us your preview on this game, and what are your thoughts leading into the weekend? Who's going to come out on top in Atlanta?
Yeah, absolutely. It's weird to me that this game is at 12 o'clock because you think about this game and it should be at 3:30 or 7. But, hey, we get to see this game, right after, game day concludes, which is fun. The Georgia fans, the Clemson fans, they don't have to wait around too long and they to watch this one. This one, guys, to me, and I hate to simplify it this much, and this is going to sound very cliche, but it simply comes down to me to the lines of scrimmage. Talking about Clemson, an interesting program where, they've kind of fallen off somewhat. I think, you guys would both agree with that. They, of course, had some unbelievable quarterback play with Deshaun Watson, with Trevor Lawrence, and hasn't been the case the past couple years. Cade Klubnik has shown flashes, but he's also been inconsistent, so it's a big year for him. But getting back to the lines of scrimmage, look, Clemson and Dabo, they're going to have a good defensive line, and that's the case this year. They're led by defensive ends Peter Woods and TJ Parker. Those guys do a really, really good job. Throw in Peyton Page in there on the interior, and then they're matching up against maybe the best offensive line in the country with Georgia. Of course, Ernest Green starting at left tackle, Tate Ratledge, who's a preseason All-American. Have heard really, really good things about new starting center Jared Wilson. So strength on strength there. And then on the flip side of that, I hate to say unknowns, but it kind of is, Clemson historically, with their good teams, offensive line play, I wouldn't say was a weakness, but it wasn't exactly a strength. And I think you can see that this year. And with Georgia, I mean, you think about the defensive lines they put out the past couple of years, it's been unbelievable. I think if you talk to, a lot of Georgia fans, Nate, if you talk to our friend Jake Rowe, he would say that this defensive line, there's certainly some question marks. And, that defensive line last year, it was good, but it was not elite. And, of course, they come into this Clemson game on Saturday with a couple of injuries, with some depth concerns. So that's going to be interesting to me. And I say all that to say this line at 13.5 points, I think it's fair. And I'm going to take Georgia in this one. And I just simply think it comes down to, I think Georgia is the better team ultimately. I think they've got more playmakers. And look, I think Clemson is a good team, and they were my pick to win the ACC. But I think where Clemson is deficient at, that's where Georgia's going to look to exploit them. I think Carson Beck is really, really going to look to light up that secondary. I think Georgia's going to throw the ball around Saturday. And partially that is because I think Clemson's secondary is a little susceptible. I think Georgia's going to really want to feature their revamped wide receiver room. And I think you've got some dudes in there that are going to put on a show Saturday in this season, but I also think it comes with a little bit of uncertainty at running back. I mean, Trevor Etienne, that's an unknown whether he's going to play. Sophomore Roger Robinson, he had surgery, so he's going to be out for a while. So Georgia is a tiny bit thin at the running back position. So I'm going to take Georgia. I think it's going to be close through 3.5 quarters. Then I think Georgia's talent and their depth overtake them. I agree with this line. 13.5, I think is fair. I'm going to take the Dogs by 2 touchdowns on Saturday.
It's a great pick, Brad. And, a lot of question marks heading into this game. Both teams facing some injuries. We always know that coming into the fall. There's going to be guys beat up through fall camp. It is what it is. And you got to adapt and you got to overcome. Ross, I'll turn it over to you. This is your game. This is your school. The Georgia Bulldogs versus Clemson Tigers. You've got a good friend that goes to Clemson, big Clemson fan. What are your takes on this game heading into Saturday and who comes out on top?
Well, like you said, this game comes down to who's able to adapt and overcome. And Dabo Swinney just does not adapt to the transfer portal whatsoever. Out of 4 schools in the entire country that took transfers, that did not take transfers, Navy, Air Force, Army, and the Clemson Tigers. If you didn't know any better, just slap the Citadel logo up there, and it's a military school. So, I mean, and Dabo Swinney, he only wins games when he has a number 1 overall quarterback, number 1 overall pick quarterback back there. Hasn't really won much else unless Deshaun Watson or Trevor Lawrence back there. So it's really, and from what I've heard, Dabo Swinney, he's got good coaches around him, but he don't know too much about what he's doing out there. If you ever noticed, he's not correcting the DBs like Kirby is on the sidelines. He's not getting into it like Kirby is. So I think it's going to come down to, Georgia, they've just got the better players flat out. And then Brenningstool for Clemson, he threw fire into Georgia's locker room by saying that he thinks they're going to win and that only people they can lose to themselves. So Brenningstool, he's adding a little poster board material to Kirby and the Dawgs this week. And like Brad said, even though ETN is a question mark and Roger Robinson's out, we still got Branson Robinson coming back, who's an absolute unit back there. We've got Nate Frazier, the number 1 running back in the entire country, coming in. And unlike Clemson, Georgia's able to utilize the transfer portal. And we got Colby Young coming in at receiver. You got Humphreys coming in at receiver. And I just don't see anywhere where Clemson is going to be able to just line up one-on-one and just really beat Georgia anywhere on that defense. Because, while Clemson may have Antonio Williams, you're not going to beat Georgia one-on-one with a 5'10" receiver back there. It's just not going to happen. So I've got the Dogs easily by a landslide.
Go for Dogs! Sick of. Great pick, Ross. Great pick. We know you're probably not going to pick against your current school that you go to, but hey, you never know. When you're on this show, you're here to win and you're here to be the best guest picker of the year. And I think you had some great picks this week, too. Want to talk about, to your point, Brad and Ross, Cade Klubnik, we know coming into his second year under Garrett Riley. Garrett Riley's supposed to be this top offensive coordinator in the college football, but we just have not seen his best work yet. We haven't seen him and Cade Klubnik be on the same page, and you have to wonder why that is. When your best player is your running back last year and Shipley, who's gone now, there's so many question marks that have to be filled at Clemson. And to Ross's point, 4 schools in all college football that didn't use the portal, and Clemson being one of them, it's just strange to me. Dabo Swinney, for the longest time, I think, was used to the old college football, managing a roster. And look, all the other coaches were good at that too. Nick Saban was good at that, right? When Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney were recruiting at the highest level, getting the 4- and 5-star guys that they needed, they were able to get them in, develop them, and become national champions. And unfortunately, unlike Nick Saban, who adapted to the change of NIL and adapted the change to the transfer portal and said, hey, I don't like this, but if I'm going to coach, I'm going to win, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to win. Clemson never did that. Dabo Swinney was very hesitant to go in the portal, still is. We thought he was going to change this year. He didn't. When we look at the other side of the ball, Carson Beck, right? This is his coming out party. He's a Heisman favorite. Can he get the Dogs back up? He's got an NIL deal with a private jet company, so we know he can get from Athens to Atlanta real quick. But can he get the ball down the field? Can he connect with his new receivers? He loses Brock Bowers. He loses Ladd McConkey. Y'all mentioned the transfers that replace him. We talk about Georgia's backfield. Look, I want to see Georgia's run game come to life this year. Since Sonny Michel and Nick Chubb have left, that Georgia run game has been good under Cook and many other guys, but it has not been elite like it was under Nick Chubb and Sonny Michel. look for Georgia to get back to that this year. I know that Mike Bobo loves that spread offense. He loves getting the ball to his guys out and about on the receiver core. But I think Etienne's going to play a role. I know he's there, but I think the running back core in general is going to play a huge role this year in getting that screen game set up, the play action for Carson Beck. Carson Beck's got to prove himself this year. I'm going to leave it at that. Carson Beck has to prove himself this year. And that Georgia defensive line, to your point, Brad, it's got to step up too. They bring in a couple of key transfers and freshmen in as well. We know that linebacker core is just going to be absolutely stout with some very veteran returning linebackers. That secondary under Malachi Starks, absolute dog. We know that he's going to be leading that secondary. I think this could be a repeat of Georgia versus Oregon 2 years ago in Atlanta. Give me the Dogs big in this one. I just cannot see Clemson coming out swinging right away. Georgia's going to be ready. Georgia's going to bring the heat. Can Clemson hit back? It's not about how hard you get hit. It's about how quickly you get back and hit him back. And I messed that quote up, but hey, that's okay. In the end, Georgia's going to win this one big. I just don't think Clemson has the depth up front or in the backfield to compete with the Georgia Bulldogs. Give me Georgia big on Saturday in Atlanta. That's the wrap for today. Be sure to subscribe, like, and comment down below who you think will win this matchup. Also, let us know what you're having this weekend. What kind of foods, what kind of spreads are we setting up on the table? That's one of my favorite parts about college football weekends is those things. Buffalo chicken dip, and so much more. Be sure to check out squadblitz.com, our new college football fantasy league app partnership. Got a great partnership with Josh, the owner of that app, has done some great work. If you're tired of the NFL fantasy apps, we've got you covered. Bigger college football fans, come on over to squadblitz.com and we'll get you set up. We'll see you next week. It's time to break the huddle.